रनवीर और आपका आज की वीडियो में
स्वागत है।
और आज हम लोग देखने जा रहे हैं द रणवीर शो का एक और पॉडकास्ट, लेकिन टाइटल क्या है वो बताएंगे मौज।
टाइटल है एंशिएंट एलियंस, स्पेसशिप्स एंड हिंदुइज्म बियॉन्ड रामायण महाभारत, डॉक्टर वनीत।
देख लेते हैं ये वीडियो, लेकिन इससे पहले
इस वीडियो के चैनल का ओरिजिनल लिंक आपको हमारी वीडियो के डिस्क्रिप्शन में मिल जाएगा। सब्सक्राइब कर, लाइक कर, शेयर कर, फॉलो कर इनके चैनल को। उसके अलावा मैं ब्लॉग चैनल का लिंक, इंस्टाग्राम का लिंक भी हमारी वीडियो के डिस्क्रिप्शन में मिल जाएगा। सब्सक्राइब कर, लाइक कर, शेयर कर, फॉलो करें।
तो चलिए देख लेते हैं ये वीडियो।
The word mythology, a lot of people actually get offended by this word, and I understand the idea of offense. It was like imperialist Europeans came to us and said that no, all this stuff, your culture, your history, it's not true. It's a myth, and we're going to call this stuff mythology. Now that's one part of India. Another part of India looks at the word mythology and places the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Vishnu Puran, the Shiv Puran in that category of mythology. Personally, I prefer to call all these things Indian history, Indian culture. That's how I look at it. But I also feel that the youth of this country, and not just the youth, maybe even our parents' generation, doesn't know enough about this subject of Indian culture. Speaking to experts like Amish Tripathi ji or Dr. Vineet Agarwal, this is what is required for the youth. This is what is required even for our parents' generation. This conversation goes beyond the world of just the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. We speak about everything you can think of, all the science fiction style stuff like Vimans, all the astronomy related stuff that was written about in ancient Hindu culture. A lot of stuff about monsters, Rakshasas, Devas, all these kind of subjects. This conversation was enjoyed a lot by myself, by my team. I hope that you're also going to enjoy this conversation as much. Remember to follow the Ranveer Show on Spotify. We're a Spotify exclusive now, which means that every episode is available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. Indian culture, my favorite subject, with one of my favorite guests that we've had on the show. Honestly, it was a joy talking to this man, and I hope that you sense some of that joy through this conversation. Dr. Vineet Agarwal on the Ranveer Show. Dr. Vineet Agarwal, one of the coolest experts on Hindu culture, Indian history, and the ancient sciences of this country. Welcome to the Ranveer Show.
Thank you so much, Ranveer, for that kind introduction.
I think you're one of those soft-spoken atom bombs when it comes to knowledge.
We'll see about that.
So you authored 3 books which are centered around Hindu culture. And I read a part of one of those books about Parshuram. And I realized how much you know, the depths of your knowledge, and you're running this sort of blog which is based on the marriage of science with ancient Hindu culture, which I find so fascinating. Because I think what a lot of young Indians don't know is that a lot of our historical records of this country were burnt, were lost, were destroyed because of all the invasions that we had over the last 1,000 years.
Right.
Probably if we rewind the clock to 1,000 years back at maybe 1 BC or 2 BC, India was maybe even more knowledgeable than it is right now.
Most definitely, Ranveer. I think that's a point a lot of people don't appreciate. That there's a disconnect between the civilization, the knowledge, the civilizational knowledge rather that we had, and how you see people behaving today. There's a huge disconnect. Why? Because people are not aware of their own culture, their own history, their own civilizational values. You see very small things, it's related to our daily lives. You see Indian cities struggling to keep up, right? In a city like Mumbai, you see the cities crumbling. It's bursting at its seams. And when you go to history, you see Indian cities were one of the most well-planned cities in the world at that time. At the time of the Indus Saraswati civilization, those cities were not matched anywhere in the world. So from there, we've come to this point because of this disconnect. And there's a lack of interest in exploring that culture, the knowledge that the culture and the history provides. I think that's a major drawback for us right now.
I think that interest is kind of rising as we speak, honestly.
Yes.
That's honestly what we built out the podcast on, that there is this newfound interest people have in Indian history, ancient culture. I'd love to know some of the science, or for lack of a better word, science fiction aspects of this ancient culture, because you've ran that blog. We have talks about demons, we have talks about Vimanas, we have talks about aliens, we have talks about dark energies in our culture, avatars, wars, atom bombs, all this.
Right.
Where would you like to begin this conversation for our audience?
So I think, Ranveer, to begin with, we need to have an open mind about the stories that are told. So a lot of people have criticisms about and a lot of doubts about the historicity of these epics, or the stories that are told, the legends that are told. But I don't think that matters. It's the lessons that we need to learn from these, the knowledge that we need to glean from these. There's so much historical knowledge, there's so much scientific knowledge that is existing in these legends and stories, and these have to be understood with an open mind. If you go with a political bias in your mind that these things couldn't have happened, or these things are just not possible in a previous era, I think that's just doing yourself a disfavor, because you are not really approaching it with a scientific outlook. That's what science teaches you, right? Question everything. And I think the very beginning of Indian scriptures with the Rig Veda, it's the beauty of curiosity. So I would say Indian religion has always been about curiosity. It is about knowing more, trying to find out more about the world, about yourself, about God, the creator of the world. So the Upanishads and the Vedas are full of such verses that encourage you to find that journey for yourself, to initiate the spiritual journey. So as the Upanishads say, Athato Brahma Jigyasa. At least start asking questions now, right? You have got this beautiful human form. And the concept of 84,000 births that you need to take if you believe in the legends. After that, you get to the human form. And even now, if you're wasting this human form, which has the intellect to grasp those concepts, which has the availability of opportunities to do it, you have access to scriptures, you have access to gurus, you have access to the religious teachings of a thousands-year-old civilization. And even now, if you're not doing it, it's a waste of an opportunity. So I would say that scientific inquiry starts from there. Who are we as a species? What are we doing on this planet? Who's the creator? Any intelligent species in the universe, I'm not just talking about humans, if there's life existing on other planets, if there's aliens, any intelligent species would have that question. Who are we? Are we alone? And who created us? Right? Where did life come from? And these questions are the birth of religion.
So we've had scientists on the show, and something that big brother to me, Abhijit Chavda, he keeps talking about is that most advanced astrophysicists or most advanced scientists eventually in life gravitate towards Vedanta, because they realize that all this mathematics I've studied over the years, suddenly I see parallels with this particular culture which people call the subcontinent, which people call India. Their culture has already figured out some higher level of mathematics or physics. They've written it in their Vedas, they've written it in their Rig Veda, and now I'm seeing parallels and I'm rediscovering some stuff that's already written there. So if my some stuff is already written there, can I go deeper in that culture and figure out theories to bring out for the Western world now through my work?
Completely.
Keeping that in mind, I'd love to ask you about aliens. Let's begin there.
Okay.
And Vimanas. We've actually had Gauranga Das on the show as well. He spoke basically about aliens. He didn't call it that, but he spoke about multiple planes, multiple planets, hellish planets, heavenly planets.
Yes.
I'd love to know your perspective on aliens.
Sure. So aliens I've always been fascinated with. As a kid, I used to watch all the science fiction movies that came out on aliens, Species, Aliens, Terminator, Predator, whatever. And I think again, that comes from a civilizational question. Are we alone in this world? Okay, we've always been fascinated with other worlds. And religious teachings or religious stories are no different, right? Some of the people try to figure out the same questions and they decided to explore the universe. Now, of course, scientific exploration was not possible given the lack of technological, which we are not able to do even today. We can't even cross the solar system to actually visit another galaxy or a constellation or a planet. So this comes from the mystical visions of the seers. So, the mantra drashtas, so the authors, who's the author of Rig Veda, if I ask you? There's no single person, right? These are collections of hymns that were seen by the rishis. Okay. They were visions that came to them. And that is why these people are called mantra drishtas. They saw the visions.
They saw the mantras.
The mantras came to them.
How do you explain what a mantra is to a Westerner listening to this podcast?
So a mantra is a collection of words that has, that's generally set in a particular meter. And this is supposed to be pronounced in a specific way, and generally they are recited at a certain specific time of the day. So they have a lot of people believe that mantras have power,
like to transform. You can probably compare it to a spell in Harry Potter.
Exactly.
Expecto Patronum.
Exactly. These are like spells, but they are interestingly, there are spells like that in the Vedas as well, the Reta Vedas, Atharva Veda also. But these mantras are more of hymns or praises or eulogies to the gods. Okay, and these mantras were seen by the seers. So there's no single author of the Vedas. There are 10 mandals of the Rig Veda, and all of these have collections of verses and hymns that were seen, envisioned by different rishis. And this, amongst these visions, were the visions of how this universe is. So this is not really detailed too much in the Vedas, but in the Purans, you see this description coming to fruition. And you see a full-blown explanation of how the universe looks. For example, Gaurang Das Prabhu, I've heard his lectures in ISKCON, and he's a very good speaker, orator. So ISKCON believes in the Srimad Bhagavad Puran, right? And Srimad Bhagavad Puran gives the entire division of lokas into different planes, of the universe into different planes. So there are 14 lokas. And now 14 lokas existing in the universe, which is not Earth. Earth is just the middle level. Earth is the Madhya Loka. And then you have the Adho Lokas, which are the lower lokas, 7 lokas below. And you have 6 lokas above. So Earth and 6 above is the higher lokas. When you're talking about these different lokas, they have to be different planets, they have to be in different locations across the universe. That automatically makes the denizens of these planets aliens. By definition. Alien is just somebody who does not live on Earth. Right? It's a species who did not originate on Earth. So by definition, because these are lokas, different planets, different galaxies probably in the universe, they become aliens. That's my thought on it. Not to say that God is an alien, but a lot of these divine beings that we're talking about, right? The devas, who have these outer world technology, they have a much, much more scientifically advanced civilization, right? They have access to these divine weapons that are like our WMDs. They have spaceships, they travel to different lokas in those spaceships. Same goes for the asuras. Even the Adho lokas, the lower planets, so to say, they're just geographically located in the low half of the universe, according to the Purans. But that doesn't mean that they are lower in any other aspect. They also have advanced science. And these asuras can also travel like that. Okay, so there's an interesting story about Tripurasur. There are 3 different cities, floating cities, that's how they have been described. There are 3 different floating cities of asuras. And they received a boon from Lord Brahma that they cannot be destroyed except when the 3 cities come in a single line. They have to be aligned perfectly. That is the only time when these cities can be destroyed. So when you talk about floating cities, what does it mean? It's either 3 different spaceships like arcs, that contain everything sustainable, or it's 3 different satellites of a planet or something to that effect, right? And the possibility of 3 different satellites revolving around a planet coming in one conjunction is very, very rare. So it's probably a scientific event, scientific principle that they're talking about. And then these cities are destroyed by Lord Shiva. And at that opportune moment, the smallest fraction of time when these three cities are aligned or these three satellites are aligned, that's when Shiva shoots the Narayanastra. And it's a grand description, okay? Shiva has Bhumi as the chariot. The sun and the moon are the wheels of the chariot. And he takes Mount Meru as the bow. And from there, he shoots the Narayanastra to destroy these in one single explosion. And this was a big event in the scriptures. It's called the Dev Deepavali. Okay, so this we don't even know of, right? But the Shiva temples, the major Shiva temples in the country, Kashi and the southern temples, they all celebrate this event. And this comes 2 weeks after Diwali.
Okay.
So when we celebrate Deepavali, 2 weeks later is the Dev Deepavali. Because this is when the Devas rejoiced. It did not affect the denizens of earth, but it affected the Devas living in their lokas. Because these Asuras who were living in these floating cities, they used to conduct raids on the Deva cities, on their spaceships. So, I mean, there is no other way to explain this, right? Except for science.
Maybe it's like evil aliens versus good aliens.
Exactly my point.
Intergalactic wars.
Intergalactic wars, and that too, people, maybe the aliens who were more friendly towards us, we started considering them as gods. And the aliens that were inimical to us, they became the villains or the asuras.
So when I was a kid, I watched a show called Vishnu Puran, which we were tripping out over in the other room. There was a beautiful show by B.R. Chopra, B.R. Chopra's Mahabharata.
Right.
And after that B.R. Chopra's Mahabharata show got done, they had reruns of it until about 1998 maybe, where they started airing Vishnu Puran.
Right.
And I remember the whole country got very gripped to Vishnu Puran. I remember being gripped to it as a kid.
Right.
And then I rewatched, I think, the first 2 episodes later on in life. When I rewatched them as an adult, I realized, whoa, this show is extremely deep.
Yes.
And I figured that there's no way the writers could have sat and had penned down these dialogues.
Completely.
They had to have taken them from somewhere because the dialogues were too heavy.
Right.
That's also why the show may not have caught on as much as Mahabharata or Ramayana, which are very simple stories.
Yes.
I won't say simple stories, but they're linear stories.
Yeah, linear stories.
They're not philosophical like this.
Yes.
So Vishnu Puran talks about the birth of the universe,
Right.
the birth of Parabrahm, which is God in general.
Yes.
But from there, I'd love for you to explain it in brief. Where does Vishnu, Brahm, Shiva fall into this birth of the universe theory?
Right.
And also, why is there a hierarchy in terms of gods? Like, why is it, okay, God, then Vishnu, Brahma, Mahesh,
Right.
then the Devis, then all the other gods, then
Yes.
Indra, etc., etc. What is this logic?
Right. I think that's a very good question. And a lot of people have these questions. I had these questions, when I started researching. And the confounding factor here is that different Purans call different gods as supreme. So in the Shiv Puran, you would find Shiva as the most supreme god. And whereas in the Vaishnavite Purans, you would find Vishnu as the supreme god. So in terms of Bhagavatam, Krishna is the supreme god, right? So I think there's some confusion there that happens in the mind of people. But if you want to understand the broad hierarchy, so it comes again, none of the Purans or any later scriptures have anything to say which is different from the Vedas. So in the Rig Veda, there's this Purush Sukta. And this Purush Sukta talks about the Adi Purush, who's the first person. Purush, of course, it's a masculine term, but it basically implies that this is the first person in the universe. And it is from him that the entire creation comes. The Purush Sukta talks about another being emerging from the Purush who starts the creation, which is Viraj. So there you have the beginnings of the story of Lord Vishnu being presented as the Adi Purush, from whom emerges Brahma, who's Viraj, and from Brahma starts the rest of the creation. Now, if you go by the Shiv Puran descriptions, it's Shiva who's there in the beginning, and then he emerges as the lingam of fire. So, very interestingly, a lot of people worship Shiva Lingam, but they don't know what it means, right? So, the Shiva Lingam actually represents a lingam of fire. It's a pillar of fire. And this pillar of fire suddenly emerges, and there's Brahma and there's Vishnu, and they don't know where it's coming from. So both of them, they decide to explore the ends of it. So Vishnu takes the form of a Vara, and Brahma takes the form of a swan. And he flies up, and Vishnu digs deeper into the lower half of it. But none of them can find the end. So finally they meet at the midpoint, and that's when Shiva emerges from it. That's called the Ling Udbhav Shiva. So some of the southern temples have this depiction of Shiva emerging from the lingam. So that's where Shiva tells them that I am the supreme one and I created you. So there are different versions, but again, a very beautiful point to understand is that all the Purans refer to different kalpas. So for this, I'll have to go a little bit backwards into what a kalpa is and what the timeline is, right? So this universe is just, according to our scriptures, this universe is just one of the multiple universes. So our scriptures actually talk about a multiverse. This is not the only universe in the world. Earth is not the only place that is inhabited. There's millions and millions of inhabited worlds out there. And these, so according to Srimad Bhagavad Puran, there's a spiritual universe, which is almost like a clear sky, blue sky. And on one corner of it, there's this cloudy place, which is the material universe. It's 1/4 of the entire portion.
Like a quadrant.
Like a quadrant. One quadrant is the material universe.
It's like Dragon Ball Z. Have you heard Dragon Ball Z?
Yes.
Anyway, go on.
So 3/4 is the spiritual universe, where Krishna resides, the Vishnu forms reside in the Vaikunt planet. And 1/4, one quadrant is the material universe, material creation, I would say material realm. Okay. Within this material realm, there is a form of Vishnu, which is the Karanodak Shai Vishnu. Okay. This might get a little complicated.
No, go on.
But this is the easiest way to understand. Okay. There's this Karanodak Shai Vishnu who's just lying in that material realm. And every time he exhales, there's a universe that pops out of his pores. So there's millions of universes coming out of Karnodak Shai Vishnu's pores. Okay. Each of this universe again has a form of Vishnu inside it, which is the Garbhodak Shai Vishnu, from whom emerges Brahma for that universe.
Okay.
And that Brahma creates all the lokas within that universe. But imagine that this entire universe exists only for one breath of this Mahavishnu, the Karnodak Shai Vishnu. So this entire process of creation by Brahma, of multiple yugas coming and going, all of this is just a single breath of Mahavishnu. That's how grand the vision is. So within this universe, when Brahma starts creating, he generally, for our universe, the story is told. We don't know how it is for the other universes, but for our universe, so Brahma has a lifespan of close to 311 trillion human years. Okay. And currently, do you know where we are right now? So this is the 51st year of Brahma.
Out of
our current Brahma.
311 trillion.
No, so that's in the human years.
Okay.
That is equal to 100 Brahma years.
Okay.
So 100 Brahma years is the lifespan. Brahma lives for 100 years.
Okay. So we are at 51 out of 100.
We are at 51 right now. So it's close to 155 trillion human years. If you convert it in human years. And currently we are in the afternoon. So we are in the 7th Manvantar. So each day of Brahma within this year, 100 years of Brahma, each year has 360 days and night, and each day is called a kalpa. Okay. So in this lifespan of Brahma, each kalpa has had different entities being created. Lord Vishnu has appeared in different avatars. It's not just the 10 main avatars that we know. There are various avatars that have happened. There's different beings have come and gone, and Brahma has recreated, everything again and again and again, multiple times. He's been doing it every day. Every morning Brahma starts creating, and every night it gets dissolved. Again, every morning he starts afresh with some inputs from the previous experiences. So each Puran belongs to a different kalpa. And in each kalpa, because creation happens differently, sometimes Brahma emerges first, sometimes Vishnu emerges first, and sometimes Shiva appears first. That is why the stories are different. A lot of people don't understand this, that the Purans belong to different time periods. And in each kalpa, the creation began in a different way. So for current day of Brahma, which is the Varaha Kalpa, Vishnu Puran was narrated in this kalpa. So Vishnu Puran actually is relevant for this kalpa. A lot of other Purans are telling stories that happened in the previous kalpas or future kalpas.
Different time periods.
Different time periods. So that is what the stories differ. But primarily it's Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh who are the Holy Trinity. They are the Holy Trinity of Hinduism, the Trimurti. they are the highest level of gods.
Yeah. Probably to encapsulate everything you said, which I possibly can't encapsulate, but I'd bring up 3 subjects. Thanks to the podcast, I figured these 3 subjects. So the 3 subjects are firstly astrophysics again, where if you go into the deep realms of astrophysics, there is a theory of infinite universes.
Yes.
Which is again parallel with what you said.
Right.
I've spoken about it with Abhijit Chawda on this show. The second is a historical theory that I've learned from studying ancient human history. We've only started writing probably around 10,000 years ago.
Right.
The first human being, the first Homo sapien,
I think it's about 80,000 years ago.
I think this form of us was
Like Homo sapiens,
Homo
sapiens, I
sapiens.
think it was about 80,000 years
Okay.
ago. Yeah.
There
Because
is-
they started moving out of Africa around 60,000 years ago.
So then I think it's like the precursor to that.
Probably.
Which is the ancestor to Homo sapiens and Neanderthals,
possible.
was there around 2 lakh years ago. But my point is there were stories
Yes.
of history that happened even in that period.
Yes.
And so much of history is lost because
Yes.
in these kind of timelines, even skeletons erode, even rocks erode.
Definitely.
So we don't even know where to begin the archaeology.
Right.
That's just the last 2 lakh years probably.
Yes, it's the
So
tip of the iceberg.
yeah, imagine what has happened, even before that.
Yes.
And the third subject I'd probably like to highlight is spiritual studies again, philosophy.
Right.
Where at the end of the day, that question of who are we?
Yes.
Every single spiritual school in the world pretty much says that you are a part of God and your job, other than your actual material duty,
Right.
is to reconnect with God. That's why they say, be a good person, treat people as you'd want yourself to be
Yes.
treated, do good work. Try growing spiritually, try learning about God, because you want to reconnect with that. And the theory about God is that imagine that all of us have universes inside us. God was just this one creature which was like us once upon a time, but it evolved to the degree where it could create many universes through itself.
Right.
So think of God as existing like a person, but to understand its own nature, it had the ability to take a cell, take it away from its brain and place it maybe on its palm and observe it.
Yeah.
Now the palm could be one universe where that
Right.
little cell gets to experience sadness,
Right.
happiness,
Right.
food, sex, trauma,
Yes.
sweating, fitness, all these human concepts.
Yeah.
Meditation, spirituality, philosophy, knowledge,
Yeah.
and then slowly rediscover itself. Which is why when we're kids, and I'm sure this has happened to you when you were a kid, you looked at your hands, you looked around you, and you said, "What is this wood?
Yeah.
What do these colors actually
Curiosity.
mean? You know,
Yeah.
what is happening here right now?"
Yeah.
Everyone has had those questions at some point in their childhood.
Exactly.
And then over time, as you grow older, you kind of get lost into the realms of materialism,
Right.
the realms of tension, the realms of Western sciences.
Right.
And you forget these questions
Right.
of what is my
You stop
actual
asking.
purpose.
You may still have those questions. You just stop asking. You just take them for granted, right? I mean, we use mobile phones today. How many people understand the principle or that they work on, right? Yesterday, the WhatsApp and Facebook and Instagram were, I mean, they were down, so to say. Why? We don't really understand what happens.
Yeah.
So we just stop asking questions. But that basic curiosity is what we need to inculcate in.
I think that's why planets and these celestial bodies exist in the first place, to remind humankind that, there is this massive
Yes,
thing
you're not
out there.
alone.
Yeah, that's so much larger than
And
you.
you're like infinitesimal in front
Yeah.
of the universe.
Yeah.
That's why I said, this entire universe is just one breath of Mahavishnu. Who are we? We are not even existing for the entire length of this universe.
That there are speculations in cultures all over the world that there was some sort of alien input in the human
Right.
story.
Right.
So I just pulled out Google. It was the cognitive revolution that happened at around 70,000 BC, when sapiens evolved their imagination. Because in order to discover science, first you have to imagine science,
Right.
which is what so many scientific minds today forget. And by scientific minds, I don't mean scientists.
Right.
I mean the people who say, "Oh, I'm a man of science."
Yes.
And they run science pages. They criticize philosophies like this.
Yes.
They don't understand that science is basically research.
Completely.
You're trying to find something that already exists.
Yes.
But in order to find that, first you have to imagine it.
Yes.
And they kind of let go of imagination. They let go of the inner child
Yes.
in that search for research papers.
Yes.
Research papers are beautiful. They're weapons for the future.
Right.
But they're not everything.
Completely.
There's a seed of thought from which research papers emerge. And you're a
Definitely.
doctor yourself. You've done your MBBS. You work in pharma right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sure research is a huge part of your life, but you've kept the child alive inside you.
Yes.
And I've seen this with philosophers, authors, scientists. All these people keep their inner child alive. It's all these pseudo, oh, look at me, I'm a cool science. And these are the people who forget to keep their inner child alive. So anyway, the cognitive revolution happened at around 70,000 BC. The agricultural revolution happened at around 10,000 BC. So there was a span of 60,000 years where we were
Nomads.
experimenting,
Yeah.
basically. We were trying to figure
Yeah.
out the world around us.
Right.
But they say that so I think I read theories about the cognitive revolution. It's linked to something called behavioral modernity. In terms of the behaviors we have today. Why do we find someone's ass hot, boobs hot? Why are we attracted to a certain person?
Right.
Why are we thinking in a certain way? Why do we chase money? Why do we like tasty pizzas and burgers?
Right.
All those things, all our behaviors in the modern day are caused because of that period of
Right,
like
right.
60,000 years. That's what
Right.
evolutionary psychology is also based
Yes.
on. But there are theories that say that no one knows why it began.
Right.
So some people link it to psychedelics. Like Graham Hancock is this historian who links it to
Yes.
ayahuasca. He says that we
Yes.
discovered ayahuasca. We started experimenting with magic mushrooms.
Yeah.
That's why we could imagine.
Suddenly, imagination, the minds opened up.
Yeah, which might be true. I've had an ayahuasca experience in my life and I've been a different person since. So, and we have som in our culture as well. right?
Yes,
What is
yes.
som though?
Som is a very, very misunderstood and misrepresented chemical, actually. I would say, as a doctor and somebody who's working in pharma, I would say som was not a psychedelic. Som was an invigorant. Okay.
Like Viagra.
No, not really. So the adrenaline rush
Yeah.
that comes, right? So som was probably something which gave you the adrenaline rush,
Like
which
coffee?
was better than that.
Okay.
So actual adrenaline, the
Oh.
chemical adrenaline.
Okay.
So som was something that triggered the release of adrenaline in your body. That's what my theory is. And in fact, a lot of people had in earlier days, they had done research on what the soma plant could have been. And there's a very close contender, which was, some people had the view that probably it was a mushroom that had psychedelic properties. But the descriptions of som and the way, the entire 9th mandal of the Rig Veda is dedicated to soma. One whole mandal of
Why?
Rig Veda, because soma formed a very important part of the ancient culture and we don't understand it, unfortunately.
Maybe this was a part of the cognitive revolution.
Precisely. But soma, it actually gave you the adrenaline rush. And if you read the 9th mandal, you would find the hymns that talk about soma being pressed out of stalks. So it was a creeper, most probably, or a shrub whose stalks were used, not the fruits or the flowers.
Like
or the
mushroom ki
leaves.
dandi.
Yeah, mushroom ki dandi, probably, but these are like jointed stems.
Okay.
That's how the description is. So
Okay.
they're jointed stems, so there are nodes in it. So probably it was a longer than a mushroom, a plant. And these stalks were used, the stems were used, they were crushed. And the juice that was, extracted, it was filtered in sheep's cloth. Okay, and then and this juice that came out was slightly bitter. These are all the descriptions in the Rig Veda, okay, and therefore it was mixed with either milk or curd to be made fit for the consumption of the gods. And when was it offered to the gods? The scriptures talk about Indra drinking pots of som, ponds of som, lakes of som, so much som he drank. And when did he do it? Not when he wanted to relax, when he wanted to go to war. So it does not make sense to have a psychedelic or an intoxicant when you're going to war. Maybe, one small bit of an alcohol, can probably release your inhibitions, but not pots of it, right? What will you fight? You will lose your judgment. So this was an invigorating substance that probably gave an adrenaline rush to the person who was drinking it. And that is why, the pupils are dilated. When you have an adrenaline rush, your pupils are dilated, your breathing is faster. Your muscles get more oxygen, your blood vessels are dilated, so you get the energy to either fight or run away. The fight or flight reaction, it's called in medicine. So the body prepares you to do either of these. Now it's your call. Either you can run away, for which you need energy, or you can fight, for which you again need energy. So body is preparing you for it. And soma was a plant that allowed you to get that adrenaline rush just by ingesting it. So like, you know, a lot of athletes or sportsmen take steroids, or you know, they take chemicals, and ephedrine is one of those chemicals which is banned. This again is supposed to give you an adrenaline rush. So soma was probably something similar.
Some natural parallel of
Natural,
everything.
exactly.
बात करें अगर आज इस वीडियो की, तो वीडियो के स्टार्टिंग में जो बात की गई एलियंस को लेकर, उनकी जो है एक मिथ को लेकर, तो नो डाउट अगर हम बहुत यानी कि सालों से देखें तो एलियन जो है वो एक मिथ बनी हुई है। बहुत सारी फिल्में भी बनती हैं, बहुत सारा लोगों का परसेप्शन भी बनाया जाता है कि एलियन ये एलियन वो, लेकिन अभी तक अगर हम देखें ना तो जो साइंस है ना वो वहां तक पहुंचने में कामयाब नहीं हुई किसी तरह से भी।
मैं ये बात बोलूंगी कि आज की वीडियो स्टार्ट करने से पहले, क्योंकि ये एक बहुत ही डीप नॉलेज वाली वीडियो है और काफी कॉम्प्लिकेटेड भी है, और जिस तरीके से वीडियो स्टार्ट किया गया मुझे लगता है कि बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग तरीका इसलिए मुझे लगा कि मुझे लगता है जब आप किसी को सुनते हैं ना, तो सबसे पहले आपको अपना जो माइंड है ना वो बिल्कुल ब्लैंक रखना चाहिए। कोई भी अपनी एक ओपिनियन नहीं बनानी चाहिए किसी टॉपिक को लेकर जो आप सुनने लगे हैं, जो भी चीज आप देखने लगे हैं, और उसकी रीजन ये कि फिर आप चीजों को बड़े अच्छे से अंडरस्टैंड कर लेते हो। लेकिन जब हम पहले से ओपिनियन बना लेते हैं ना, तो फिर वो हम लोग थोड़ा सा वहां पर चीजों को उस तरीके से अंडरस्टैंड नहीं कर पाते। बट एनीवे, जिस तरीके से एलियंस वाला टॉपिक स्टार्ट हुआ, एलियंस वाला वैसे मेरे लिए तो कभी इतना इंटरेस्टिंग नहीं रहा, बट समहाउ मुझे लगता है कि मे बी एलियंस वो होते हैं जो कि डिफरेंट प्लैनेट्स पर रहते हैं, लेकिन अगर हम लोगों के लिए वो एलियंस है क्योंकि मे बी वो हमारी तरह नहीं दिखते हो, मे बी वो कुछ और उनका रहने का तरीका हो, इस वजह से वो हमें इस तरह से लगता।
अच्छा, एलियन वाली बात है जो है, मेरा एक सवाल है, शायद में भी बहुत सारे लोगों को ये जो है फनी भी लगे, लेकिन जैसे क्या नाम लेते हैं वीडियो में जिक्र किया गया कि जमीन से बाहर रहने वाले जो हैं लोग हैं या जो भी वो चीज़ है उसे हम एलियन कहते हैं। तो जैसे सुनने में आता, न्यूज़ में आता, किसी ने कोई दूसरे सितारों पे ज़मीन खरीदी, चांद पे किसी ने ज़मीन खरीद ली, तो इन फ्यूचर क्या ऐसे इंसान हमारे लिए एलियन कंसीडर्ड होंगे? आपको क्या लगता है?
वेल मे बी हो भी सकता है, बट आई थिंक ये जो होल कॉन्सेप्ट हम लोगों ने आज जो देखा है, मुझे लगता है कि इसमें बहुत ज्यादा पोर्शन हम लोग ने मल्टीवर्स का देखा है। अगर मैं अभी ये बात देखूं तो कुछ टाइम पहले मुझे नहीं पता था इतना ज्यादा कि हमारी जो हमारा प्लैनेट है इसके अलावा भी और प्लैनेट्स हो सकते हैं, मतलब जहां पर लोग रह सकते हैं या मतलब वो रहते होंगे। बट अभी जैसे मैं चीजें देखती हूँ मुझे और ज्यादा क्यूरियोसिटी होती है, और वाकई में जैसे कि वीडियो के स्टार्ट में भी बोला कि चीजों को जानने कि आप में क्यूरियोसिटी रहनी चाहिए कि ये कैसे, और वाकई में बचपन में भी ऐसा होता है कि बहुत सारे क्वेश्चन आपके जहन में ऐसे रहते हैं कि ये कैसे हुआ, ये क्यों हुआ, जिसके आंसर आपको नहीं मिलते। बट विद टाइम जब आपको आंसर मिलना शुरू हो जाते हैं तो मुझे लगता है वो एक के बाद एक कड़ी मिलना शुरू हो जाती है। अच्छा, जहां तक हम बात करेंगे लॉर्ड विष्णु की और लॉर्ड शिवा की और ब्रह्मा जी की, तो ये मुझे थोड़ा सा आइडिया है कि सबसे सुप्रीम पावर जो है वो शिव जी हैं, फिर शिव जी से विष्णु जी बने हैं और विष्णु जी ने ब्रह्मा जी को क्रिएट किया है। फिर उसके बाद जो मतलब बाकी सारी जैसे इसमें हायरार्की का एक डिस्कस किया गया वो सारी चीजें आती हैं। बट एक पॉइंट मेरे लिए काफी मैं कहूंगी कि कम्प्लेक्स था अंडरस्टैंड करना, और वो था कल्प वाला, कि उसमें ब्रह्मा जी की जो लाइफ है वो 311 ट्रिलियन ह्यूमन ईयर्स के मतलब इक्वल है, यानी कि टोटल उनकी जो लाइफ है वो 1000 साल बनती है ना, मतलब जो ब्रह्मा जी की है, और हम लोग 51 ईयर में है, यानी कि जो टोटल
100 साल बनती है और हम उनके 51 ईयर में हैं।
हाँ सॉरी, 100 साल बनती है और हम 51 ईयर में है ना, 100 साल बनती है ना, कंफर्म है ना?
हाँ कंफर्म है, 100 साल बनती है। लेकिन
तो ये मेरे लिए बहुत एक नई चीज थी।
बिल्कुल, लेकिन क्या नाम लेते हैं जो मल्टी यूनिवर्स का जो है ना, एक हमने वो जब हम लिटिल कृष्णा का एपिसोड देखा था जिसमें ब्रह्मदेव जी हैं, वो एक परीक्षा कह ले, आजमाइश कह ले, उसमें डालते हैं उन्हें दो सुन के छीन के, तो वहां पर जो है हमें ये चीज देखने को मिली कि इस यूनिवर्स के अलावा और भी यूनिवर्स है जहां पर जो है बहुत सारे जो यानी कि हर यूनिवर्स का अपना अपना एक ब्रह्मदेव है। तो ये चीज हमें वहां पर देखने मिली। उससे पहले मुझे इस चीज का आइडिया बिल्कुल भी नहीं था। बाकी मंत्रों की बात करें तो नो डाउट आपके जितने भी वो रिलीजियस बुक्स होती हैं उनमें जो है कुछ ना कुछ ऐसे वर्ड्स होते हैं जिनसे जो है जिनको आप इस्तेमाल करते हैं तो कुछ वो कहते हैं ना कि फील होना, पावर फील होना आपको वो होती हैं।
मंत्र वाली बात में कहूँ, मैं उस चीज को अंडरस्टैंड कर पा रही थी कि जहां पर उन्होंने बात बोली ना कि ऋषि जो थे उनको नजर आता था और वो उसी चीज को मे बी मतलब बताते थे और कोट कर दिया करते थे, तो ये चीज मैं अंडरस्टैंड कर पाती हूँ कि ये किस तरह से एक होप पाता हो, क्योंकि जब हम लोग भी पढ़ते हैं इस्लाम को पढ़ते हैं तो उसमें भी ये चीजें इनके बारे में जिक्र हुआ है कि किस तरीके से जो चीजें हैं या आयतें हैं वो उतरा करती थी। उसके साथ साथ एक चीज जो मुझे मतलब थोड़ा सा पता नहीं मैं समझ पा रही हूँ या नहीं समझ पा रही कि डिफरेंट कल्प रहे हैं, मतलब कि जब शिव जी का कल्प होता था तो वो उस टाइम पर जाहिर होते थे, फिर विष्णु जी के कल्प में वो खुद जाहिर होते, और अभी जो कल्प चल रहा है वो ब्रह्मा जी का कल्प चल रहा है, ऐसा ही है ना?
हाँ वैसे जो उसमें बताया गया उसके मुताबिक तो यही है।
लेकिन एक क्वेश्चन मेरे जहन में ये आ रहा है कि जैसे हम लोग कह रहे हैं कि डिफरेंट मतलब इस यूनिवर्स के पैरेलल और बहुत सारी यूनिवर्स है, अभी जो कल्प चल रहा है वो ब्रह्मा जी का कल्प है, तो मतलब मेरा पूछने का ये है कि जो डिफरेंट यूनिवर्स हैं या डिफरेंट और प्लैनेट्स हैं उसमें लाइक जो ब्रह्मा जी और जो बाकी देवी देवताएं हैं उनका भी क्या सेम इसी तरीके से रहा होगा जैसा कि हमारे वाले में है, या वो डिफरेंट रहा होगा, या वो किस तरीके से चलता होगा? ये मेरे जहन में एक क्वेश्चन आ रहा था। और क्योंकि हम लोग 14 लोग जितने भी हैं उनमें हम लोग मिड में आते हैं, तो मतलब ऐसा मैंने पढ़ा है, और ये जो ऊपर जैसे ही आप ऊपर वाले लोक में जाते हैं वो बेहतर लोग हैं, यानी कि वो एक होता है ना कि यानी कि उनकी अच्छी आदतें होती हैं, या मतलब इतना ज्यादा वो गलत कामों में नहीं होते, लेकिन जैसे ही आप नीचे वाले लोक में जाते हो वो
तो बुराई बढ़ती जाती है।
एग्जैक्टली। तो मैं ये बात सोचती हूँ कि जो बाकी जो यूनिवर्स हैं या जो डिफरेंट मतलब बनी हैं वो किस लोक में आती होंगी,
ये मुझे भी नहीं बिल्कुल मालूम, ये तो जवाब जो है आप देंगे। लेकिन मैं मेरी जो एक ही चीज हमेशा रही है ना कि हम जब साइंस की थ्योरी की बात करते हैं ना तो यूनिवर्स जो है वो एक प्रॉपर जो है वो चीज बताई जाती है, इस तरह बनी, इतने हजार साल से ठंडे होने में लगे, ये हुआ वो हुआ। लेकिन फिर भी आप जब सोचते हैं ना कि आखिर दुनिया बनी क्यों, आखिर इसके पीछे वजह क्या थी, तो वो ये चीजें इतनी कॉम्प्लेक्स हो जाती हैं, आपके जहन में इतने सवाल आते हैं कि आपके पास वो जो सवाल होते हैं ना उनके जवाब देने वाले बहुत कम लोग होते हैं, बहुत कम लोगों को उसके बारे में नॉलेज होता है। वरना जैसे बीच में वीडियो में जिक्र किया गया कि हम जो अपना एक नॉलेज था ना उससे बहुत दूर होते चले गए हैं एक लंबे अरसे से। तो ये हकीकत है कि हम वाकई उससे जो है कोसों मील दूर है।
बट उसके साथ साथ हम लोग नॉलेज को सीखना भी नहीं चाहते ना, मतलब हमारे में इतनी ज्यादा बाउंड्रीज बन गई है, नहीं ये मेरे रिलीजन का नहीं है, ये उसके रिलीजन का। आई थिंक आपको जब आपको नॉलेज लेना ना तो आपको इस तरीके से लेना चाहिए कि आपको कुछ सीखना है। अभी जैसे बीच में एक और जिक्र हुआ था विष्णु जी का कि जब वो एक ब्रेथ लेते हैं तो एक यूनिवर्स बन जाती है। आई मीन ये बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग और मैं कहूंगी कि डिफरेंट एक जानकारी है हम लोगों के लिए, जो भी ये कंप्लीट एपिसोड तो नहीं हम लोगों ने भी देखा क्योंकि काफी लंबा था, लेकिन इसका सेकंड पार्ट हम कल देखेंगे। बट मुझे लगता है कि ये ऐसी इंफॉर्मेशन थी और ऐसी चीजें हैं जो कि आप जितना पढ़ते हो और जानते हो उस आपको उतनी ज्यादा इंटरेस्टिंग लगी हैं। ऑनेस्टली मैं बोलूँ, मैं जितना ये चीजें पढ़ती हूँ ना सनातन धर्म के बारे में मुझे बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग लगती है, क्योंकि लॉजिकली कहीं ना कहीं पर आपको मैं कहूंगी कि वो चीजें समझ में आ रही होती हैं। और दूसरा ये कि साइंटिफिकली चीजें आजकल के टाइम में वो प्रूव हो रही हैं जो कि इतने हजारों साल पहले मतलब आपको बुक्स में नजर आई हैं कि लिखी हुई हैं। तो किसने लिखी हैं, कब लिखी हैं, किस तरह से लिखी हैं, क्या वाकयात हुए थे, ये सारी चीजें आपके माइंड में आती हैं। और इसके अलावा अगर कोई पॉइंट हम लोगों ने मिस कर दिया और अगर आप समझते हैं कि हम लोगों को ये और अच्छे तरीके से समझने की जरूरत है तो आप प्लीज कमेंट सेक्शन में जरूर लिखिएगा, या आप हमें ईमेल कर सकते हैं और आपका क्या कहना है इसके बारे में जरूर बताइएगा कमेंट सेक्शन में। और इसी के साथ ही हमें इजाजत, वीडियो
लाइक, सब्सक्राइब, शेयर,
गुड बाय।